Hi everyone, welcome back. Hope everyone's doing all right, and I hope everyone already here have their lunch already. So to start, I'm Alia. I'm from the SC University Technology Petronas, and today we'll be doing a tutorial on how to integrate Firebase onto push messaging, and will be presented by Mr. Eleazar Gan. So for those who are new here, and for those who don't know much about DSC, so BSc are basically university-based community groups for students interested in Google developer technologies and for anyone who wants to explore new technologies. So we welcome everyone from different backgrounds, different majors, so you don't even have to know about programming or IT to join DSC. And DSC provides an opportunity for students to basically improve their skills in IT or AI technologies through workshops, trainings, and basically and students also get to network from people all around the world to solve local problems. So before we start the talk, I would like to show you guys about what is actually DSC.
Developer student clubs train thousands of student developers globally and work with their communities to solve real-life problems. Google selects amazing students from across the globe once a year to be a developer student club lead and start a club on their campus. These leads believe knowledge is power and that technology can do extraordinary things for the world. They take on the responsibility to help students learn and empower these students to solve real problems around them. Join us in building a global community for students.
So I hope through that video, everyone's interested in joining the SC. And now I would like to invite Mr. Eleazar to basically present himself. Here, this is Mr. Eleazar. Say hi. So before we start, I would like to talk a bit about Eliza's background. So he is currently a chief technology officer at Ombré, and he was a freelance software developer for around 3 years. He had worked on several Firebase projects using Firebase Hosting, Realtime Database, and storage. He had also worked on Lateral Framework and multiple Java projects to develop POS system for small companies. So as you can see, he's quite experienced in software development and web development. So he's also a tech enthusiast, and he's an inspiring tech leader. So for those who are from UTP, Untitled Chapter, he's actually an alumni. So yeah, I hope everyone will enjoy his tutorial today. And if there's any question, just post it on the comment section and the chat box, and then he'll try to answer. So I'll pass the floor to Mr. Eleazar.
Okay. Yeah. So I will explain a little bit about what we're going to do today. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to create a chat app with React Native and going to implement Firebase as backend for our app. So I will start by going through the installation process that we need. So for this tutorial, we're gonna use Expo CLI because that will be simpler than using the native React Native CLI. And one reason that we are using it because we're not gonna be writing any native code for iOS or Android. So we're going to be writing mostly in JavaScript. So using Expo should be sufficient enough, and the setup process for Expo is simpler than the setup process for React Native CLI. So basically, the only thing that we need to do to set up Expo is just to run this in your terminal. So I have my terminal over here. So I already have Expo installed. So what you need to run is just npm install, and it's a global, so you have to use -g and CLI. Yep. So it will take some time to install the package. So we will run through a little bit about running the application. So basically running the application with Expo, we can run it with the browser web itself. We can run it through emulator. So we can run it in iOS emulator or Android emulator, depending on what operating system you are working on. So if you are working on Windows or Linux operating system, so you will be able to run it only on Android simulator. But if you are on Mac OS, you'll be able to run it additionally on iOS simulator, because iOS simulator only can be run in Mac OS natively. Unless you're running Hackintosh in your PC, then there's another way of running it. But for my explanation throughout the tutorial, I'll be using iOS simulator because it will be easier for me. So basically, once you have installed everything, yeah, you should be able to run Expo just like that. So running that will mean that we have already installed Expo in our PC. So then we will have to create our app. So we will create a basic app and we'll run through a little bit on it. So we will say Expo init and the app that we are creating. So we are creating a chat app. So let's just name it that. And choose the first one, blank. We're not going to be using TypeScript for this tutorial. Just to make it simple, we just use JavaScript, and Also, we are not going to be using any tabs for our app because it's going to be a simple app. So we will just go with the blank canvas. So once we choose that, Expo will install the dependencies that we need to run our app. So let's let that run for a while and go through the third-party dependencies that we need. So the first one will be this one over here, React Native Gifted Chat. So this library will be mostly the UI that we're going to use for our chat app. So if you see the demo over here, you can see that it's the UI is basically there. So it is a full-fledged UI. So what we have to do is just to implement the logic behind sending the messages or receiving the messages or sending images or location, things like that. But for the sake of simplicity in this tutorial, we will just be sending and receiving text, plain text. And also, we won't go through deep into chat rooms and things like that. So we will just be having one chat room for everyone. And in that chat room, everyone will be able to communicate with each other and seeing each other's reply and things like that. Okay. So let's go through a little bit deeper on this. Yeah, so for this example, if you can see over here, this is how we're going to use the library. So it's just pretty straightforward. It is one component, and then we will integrate the logic behind it as a prop for the component. Okay. So in React Native, most of the UI that we're going to develop will either be a screen or a component. So the term for screen is basically a list of components that you have created and you can display in one screen. So a component is a smaller feature, a smaller UI in a screen. For example, you have a text input components, you have a button components. So all of these components, they can receive a set of props. Props is something that you pass to the component externally, where you call the components. For example, here we are calling the gifted chat component in example class. So from this class, we can pass in a few props into the component, which is the messages, and we can tell the component what to do when certain thing happen in the component itself. And so, for example, here, if user clicks send, then we will trigger our own methods, which we create in our class here. Okay, so yeah, this is the first library that we're going to be using to develop the app. And of course, we're going to be needing Firebase as well. So let's go back to our terminal. So our app is ready. So the first thing we want to do once we have set up our app is to run it and test whether it's working or not. So I'm using Yarn, and you can be using NPM. So both works the same. So if you're using NPM, you're going to be running NPM run iOS or Android or web. So it's pretty straightforward. So I'll be running it in my emulator. So I'll be running Yarn on iOS, and it will open. You will install an Expo app in the simulator itself, and it will open the app. All right, let's wait for that to compile. So basically, the main thing about using React Native to develop a mobile app is one thing, you don't have to write multiple code base for iOS or Android. So you can just run it in one code base and then compile it to run in multiple operating system, mobile operating system. So that is one good thing. It reduces your time in development, and also it will improve your team development in a way, because everyone will just have to know JavaScript, that is React Native language. Yeah, basically you can just write app immediately after that. So here, if you can see, we have run our app. This is my simulator, and yeah, so I'm going to be opening it in my IDE. So the entry point of a React Native app will be the app.js in the root folder of your project. So over here, for example, if I'm going to change this one, and click save, you will have a hot, this is hot reload for the app. So it will appear immediately in your simulator, or in your mobile app, or in your web browser, wherever you are testing your app. Okay, so this will be the bare bone of our app today. And so we're going to be using Firebase. So the first thing that we are going to be installing will be Firebase. So since we are using Expo, Expo has a way of identifying the version of libraries that that suits the version of React Native that we're using. So every time we want to install a library, we will always use Expo install instead of yarn add or npm install. So because if we use npm install or yarn add, this will always install the latest version of the library, but it won't always it won't always mean that the library is compatible with the React Native version that we are using currently. So we're going to be using Expo install Firebase for our dependency installation. It will still going to be running yarn add behind the scene, but it will identify the version that is compatible to our current mobile app. Yeah. So while that is installing, Firebase usually takes some time to install. It can take up to 2-3 minutes, depending on your internet speed. So I'll keep this here, and we will go set up our Firebase project first. So if you're not familiar with Firebase project, you can just create your, you can just go to Google Console and using your Google account, and I think you will definitely see the dashboard immediately. So what you have to do is just click Add Project and create a project name here, and just click Continue. I'm not going to create it now because I've already created one. So yeah, so we're going to be using this demo project right now for the app itself. And yeah, two things that we're going to use today will be the authentication feature and also the database itself. So for the authentication, we're going to be using a simple authentication, just email and password, and just storing that as an authentication user over here. So we're not going to be storing any user information in the database. So we're going to be using the database only for our messages. So our chat messages will be stored in database. So we'll start with the authentication. So we just go to sign in method and click enable on this one. So once that's enabled, then we are done with authentication. So we will just do the implementation in our app immediately. The next thing will be database. Okay, so for this tutorial, we're going to be using Realtime Database, and just click create, and we use test mode. So the difference between log mode and test mode is, for log mode, you can actually authorize someone to access your database. That one will be more secure. But right now, since we are building a development app and testing, so we will not do the authentication. So we'll just allow anyone in the project to access our database. So we'll click enable, and it will create a database for us right here. So once that's done, we can just implement the SDK in our app and just push messages into our database. So for example, like this name. So we have a value here. It will be like this. So real-time database in Firebase will be a NoSQL, and it will just be a key value throughout the database. So there won't be any column or rows or identifying the relationship between different tables. So it will just be a document, key value database. So it's pretty straightforward to use. So I'll remove this for now. Okay, so yeah, seems like our Firebase is installed. And the next thing we're going to install is our UI for our chat. So we're going to copy this React Native Gifted Chat UI. I'm going to say export install. And that will install the dependencies that we need for our chat UI. So the next thing we need will be the React navigation. So we're going to be having 3 screens in our app currently. So the first screen will be the sign up screen, of course, because we need the user to sign up. And the second one will be the login. So after a user sign up, they will need to log in to use the app, of course. And then the last one will be our chat app. So to switch between screens in our app, we're going to be using React navigation. So to install React navigation, it's also pretty straightforward. We're going to just copy this installation process. Instead of yarn add, we're going to use export install. Okay, once that's done, we go down and we will see these are the dependencies that we need if we are running in an Expo project. So we just copy that, paste it here, and run it. Okay, so we have installed the dependencies that we need for React navigation, and let's have a look on how we can implement this. So here we can see that we have a screen. Okay, so in the screen we have components that we are using. So we have 2 components here, view and also text. So in every screen there will be a view. Usually there will be a view and then you have button inside. That way you can arrange how you want your components to be arranged in the screen itself. So this is pretty common here. And then we can see that we are using navigation container from the library that we installed, React Native. And then here you see we also need one more library, which is React Navigation Stack. So we're going to install that one as well. We'll just run export install. Let that install. All right. So if you see the example here, they have one screen, which is home screen, and the function for home screen will be here, and it will only show one screen over here. Okay. So let's implement that into our app. All right, we are here. Okay. So we're going to be running our app again. Okay, so I will restart the app. Click on the project, and yeah. So whenever you restart the export start command, usually it will not do a hot reload in your app. So you will have to sort of like restart your app. So you close the window and then you open the export app again. So to make sure it's running, we can just run this. So, okay, it's working. Right, so here in our app, so we're going to do several things over here. So first thing will be we want to do import for our navigation stack. This one will be create stack navigator. And the second one will be the native. Oops. Native. Okay. So this one will be the navigation container. Okay. So we will have the navigation container as the wrapper for this one. And then we will say stack is equal to create stack navigator. So we will use this stack throughout our app. So we will say stack dot navigator, and then we have stack dot screen, just like that. Okay, so to show our first screen, what we're going to be doing is we're going to create a new folder. We call it screen. So all of our screen will be in this folder. This is one of the way we separate the concern between screens and components, or the logic itself. So usually what we're going to do is create screen, and if we have small components that we will be creating, we will create components folder, and everything will be in that folder. So if you're working in a team, this will be beneficial because your team will know exactly where your code is for screens or for components or for logic. So for this tutorial, we're going to be using screen, and then we will create the first one that we're going to be using is signup page. We're going to create a signup page. So of course, we need React from import React. Okay, so for this tutorial, we'll be using React hook. So if we see in React Native, not React.js hook. So this is the latest way of doing state management in React. So we won't be using things like Redux or any other third-party state management library. So we will be using the React hook that is being introduced to React itself. So to use that, what we're going to be importing is just to import use state. And then to use React hook, we cannot create our screen by using class. So instead, we will have to use functional components for our screens. So that will be something like sign up and that. Okay. So we'll be exporting our sign up page. Okay, so let's try to return a view right here and just a text, maybe just a text input. Okay, so we'll be importing that from React Native. View and text input. Okay, so here, show this one, there's error, okay. So we will give a name to our screen. So we call it sign up, and then we pass in the prop components, which is going to be our sign up. If we refresh this, okay, we can see that nothing is happening here because our input is empty. So say, for example, we give a placeholder, enter your email, something like that. Refresh. Something's wrong. Just going to reload the app. Right, so here we can see the two input field that we've created. So we're going to be styling our app a little bit. So we're going to import the style sheet from React Native, and we create styles by using this method. So the first thing we're going to create is the style for our input. Let's give it a border, the radius of maybe 5, and a height of 40. What else do we give it? A border color of gray. We give a padding left 8 and also padding right 8. So to use it in our input, we will just say style and import the style input, just like that. So you will see that it is already being updated. So we're going to give it a border width. We give it a 4. Too big. Okay, so that way, because this is a global style, so we can reuse it in any components that we have. For example, like this. Press that, so it will appear in both. Let's do a little bit more. Let's separate the two input field by giving margin bottom greater than 8. Okay. Okay, so looks good. Another thing that we're going to be styling is the view itself. So for the view, we're going to give it a page flags 1 and say padding of 12, maybe. Oops. And then we will say style view. Style view. Yeah. Let's make it container. And typo here. So that way we can see that we give styling for our view. Okay. So once that's ready, let's add in the input fields that we need. So to sign up, we will need three inputs from the user, which is their name, their email, and password. So these three are the most common that every app is using. So let's create a new one over here and say password. Okay, so we have enter your name, enter your email, and enter your password. And the last thing will be the button for the user to submit the form. So we'll be using a React button. Oops. Okay, so here you see we have two props to return. The first one will be on press, another one will be title. So the title, we're going to say sign up, and make sure to import this from React Native and not React Native app, web. So yeah, web. So in Ombré, so we can pass a function into this prop. For example, we can say alert test. So right now, if we click on this, so you can see the alert pop up, and we can create a method for that. So for example, here we say submit form. Okay. So this way of writing function is similar to writing it like this. Submit form. Yeah, it's similar to writing it like this, but it will look cleaner to write it like this because we start our component by using this way of writing the function. So we will just follow the style for now. So we'll not have any parameters into the function. So let's do it again and say test. And instead of alert, we pass in our submit form function. If you click, it will still show the same thing. Okay. Now we know that the button is working. Let's create state management for our application. So since we're going to be using use state, the way that we're going to be creating our state will be, so in this page, we have a user object. So we can group the email, password, and name into one user object instead of using separate state for each one of it, because that will make your code look longer. So for example, if you have something like set email like this, go to use it. So you will initialize it as a plain text. So like this, since you have email, password, and one more thing is name. So you have something like set password, then set name. So this one can be, you can work it like this, but it's not going to be pretty for your app. So for example, here we only have 3 different state, but if we're going to have more than 3, for example, in our sign up page, if we have name, password, email, maybe an address, or maybe your height or your age or whatever it is that the app is asking from you. If we have a lot, then it's going to be messy. It's going to be something like this, and that won't be pretty in our code. So what we're going to be doing today, we'll be using one user object, and we just set that user like this, state. So we will initialize the key that we want to have in the user object. So the first thing will be the name, the user's name. Set it as string, and then will be the user email and the password. Okay. So we have that one. We can use the user state now in all our text inputs. So for the value, we will just say user.name is, say user dot, this is email. Another one will be user password. Okay. So here, if we try to type something, it's not going to show anything because we are not updating the state yet. And to do that, we will need to have an onChange prop, which is going to be returning the name. So the return of the prop will be a text, the text of the input itself. So we can rename it. So you can just use text like that, or you can be specific, just use name, and then say set user. We're going to be using our set user function here for the state. And then since we are going to be setting the name inside of the object, so what we're going to do is we're going to just spread our user object and just input a new name. So what this does is if you are trying to deal with array or object in JavaScript, this will basically spread it out. So for example, you have an object of user object. So you have name, simple one, and age maybe. So what this does is you will create a new object, okay, from this object, but you spread it out one by one. So that will create that will mean that the spreader will input this into the new object and also input this into the new object. So it will be done automatically. So we'll just use the spreader right here. And since we want to update the name, so we will just say name right here. So we can do something like this, name, but since the value and the key is the same, so we can omit that and just say name. So if you use text over here, you might want to say name text like that. So this is a way to make your code looks cleaner and simpler and elegant, more elegant in a way. Okay, so here the next one we have will be email. Same, we're going to update the email. And then here we have our password. It will be returning password. Save that and refresh the app. Here you can see that when we click and we enter our name, it will work now. Go to email, it will work, okay. Okay, now that we know the input field is working, we will go to, so if you realize here, the first letter in our text field is always capitalized, and we especially don't want that to happen in email and password because that will affect the accuracy when we type. So we will want to say capitalize, and we set it to false. So this is one of the prop that our input field provide. Yeah. So as you can see here, now it's not capitalized anymore. Okay. So if you notice, the password is not secure because you can see the password as you type in. So one thing you can do for that is secure tags props. Just set true and refresh the app. And oops, secure tags. Okay. Let's see what kind. Secure text entry. So if you have doubt of the props that can be passed into a component, you can always go to the component file itself and see what props they allow you to pass in. So for example, for this text input, there are a lot of things that you can pass in. So we'll just use the secure text entry for now and save this. So if you see, it's already updated to use the bullet. So that will be more secure. So now we can use our form. So for example, we want to create a new, so just give it a password, sign up. Okay, so now we want to implement our sign up logic. So since we're going to be using Firebase, we're going to be going back to our project, and you will need to create a new project, a new app over here. So you will need to create a web app and click the name that you want and click register app. Since I already have the app, so I won't be creating that one. So what we will need is these settings over here. So you shouldn't be sharing this setting to anyone else other than yourself, but since we are live right now, so I'm just gonna share it here. So we're going to create a new directory. Oops. To call this a config for our Firebase. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an object for managing all our Firebase related API calls from the SDK. So we're going to be creating a file called Firebase. We just call it Firebase Sdk. So here, of course, we need to import Firebase from Firebase. And then we create our class, Firebase Sdk. Okay. Right. So here, we'll have a constructor to create our, so we'll just copy this. And we'll say Firebase initialize app and just paste it in. This way we will have our Firebase package initialized whenever we want to use it, because we're going to be accessing it from our config. So what we're going to do is we're going to create Firebase Sdk equal to Firebase Sdk. Export default. So we're going to be exporting that. Okay, so over here, what we're going to do is, since we're going to be using this SDK throughout the app, so we don't want to be initializing the Firebase app several times. So we want to check if we have already initialized the app, we will just return the SDK right away without initializing it anymore. So how we're going to do that is we're going to be using firebase.apps. You can set the length. If the length is empty or 0, so we will initialize the app. Okay, so next thing that we want to do is what do we do? Sign up. So we have sign up. So we have create user. We're going to be create user. It's going to be a function that will pass in user. There's some error over here. Okay. Oh, okay. Create user equal to something like this, and then we'll pass in. Okay. So we will be creating constant that. Now we will be initializing it. Okay, so we have our create user method here, which receives the user that we pass in. What we're going to do is we're going to say Firebase auth. We're going to use the auth library from Firebase, and we're going to be using this method. Okay. So in this method, let's see what needs to be passed. You need email and also password. So we will pass in the email, user email, and user password. Just like that. Okay, so if we see our this one, since we are using Firebase Sdk, it has to be async. So we'll say await for this to happen. Okay, and then if it's successful, so what we're going to do is going to have a function here, say alert registered successfully. Okay. Okay. Right. Now let's test this function in our app. So what we're going to do here is going to call our Firebase Sdk and say, oops, create user. So you have this as class Firebase Sdk, right? And we have this. Oh, okay. It's a class, so we will need to use this. And it's a constructor. Create user. So we will not need this. So we also create user as thing. Okay. Now we should be able to call create user here. So we just pass in user into our function. And since the method is an async method, so this one will have to use await as well. Implement it right there. Let's try it now. It should say register successfully. Something like this. Let's see. Email must be a valid string. Okay. All right, let's troubleshoot this and see what are we passing into our method right here. So we just do that and open our terminal. And right here, we can see what we pass in. So, okay, we have name, email, and password. Seems to be correct. On change text should be on change text. And let's try again. Oops, refresh. Let's reload the app and see. On top of those very false. Part 2. Okay. See what's the problem. Okay, that's right. So it should be on change text instead of on change. And now we should be able to register. Yep. So now we register successfully. If we go back to our authentication, you can see that there is a new user being created right here. So yep, that's working fine. The next thing that we want to do will be creating a login screen. So we create a login.js. Going to be similar. We're going to import React from React. And this one will be login. All right, so we're going to export default login. From here, we're going to return also, let's try it out. Import view from React Native, like that, and we can use the view. Inside the view, what we're going to do is say text input as well. So we'll be creating text input here. Two text input. So let's give it a placeholder. Enter your email. Something like this. The second one will be enter your password. Okay. To show that in our app, we will need to import it here and give it a name, login. So login will always be the first page to appear. And then say we want to pass login here. Okay. So, okay, let's refresh this. The app. So as you can see here, we're going to have the login page as the first page that appear. So since it is the first page, we might need a way to go to our sign up page. So we're going to input buttons. Button, and say we have the, what was it? Okay, so we have the on press. We have the on press and title. So we're going to say title as sign up. Or make it I want to sign up. Okay, so here what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to our page. So to navigate, React Navigator will always pass in a navigation props into your function. So we're going to make use of that. Say navigate to our sign up page. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so it's working. So we can go back and go to our sign up page. So for the styling of our page, we're going to be using similar styling. So we just copy this and bring it here. Style sheet. This one will be style container. And for our input field, style input. Same goes to this one. Okay. Now looks a little bit better than without styling. So that's for it. So in our login page, we will have two values that we store in our state. So similarly, we're going to use use state here. And same constant. Here will be user set user use state. And in user, we have email and password. Now we set the value to user.email. This one will be user.password. And also we want to use secure text field. Was it that? Secure text entry. So that is true, and now, oops, we need to have update. So if we say something like this, it will show up here. Okay, we know it's working. Now we say on change text. So here is the email. So we'll pass in the email. And we're going to do something similar with the signup page. So we're going to be using set user, and we're going to spread the object, getting a new object and spreading this object. And pass in the email. For password, it will be password. Let's try it out. Okay, so there's the problem with capitalized word, capitalized first letter. So we're going to disable it by passing false. Yeah. So here we can type our email and password. Okay, so now we want to implement the login button. So we get a new button and pass in the title. So on press, pass in a function similar to our signup page, and we will first try it by passing alert, so it's working. Now we can create a method and say login. Okay, so now here we're going to pass our method, login method. That's it here. Make sure it's working. Okay. Now that we have all this ready, we will need to implement login in our SDK. So we create user. Here will be login. Sing. We also pass in the user object. Okay. So we say await Firebase.auth. We will say this will be sign in with credential. So what we're going to pass in will be the credential. You can see over here. Okay. Hold on. Sign in with email and password. This is the right one. Yeah, so we will need the email and password. So we will do the same thing, user password, and then we will have the callback. Let's say here alert login, something like this. So in login page, we will call await Firebase Sdk login, and we pass in our user object, just like that. Change this to async. Let's try to log in. Okay, so we will need to have a error handling right here. So this will be error. Alert. We just show the message. When we click login, it will show the alert. There is no user, so we know that the user doesn't exist. So there's a typo in my email. So if we do it again, so now it shows login. So one problem is that currently our pages only show login and sign up. So we will need to check if we are logged in, then we want to display a different page, which is our chat page, chat screen. So if you go back to React navigation here and find authentication flow, we can see how it should be done in the documentation itself. So we check whether the user is signed in or not. If it's signed in, then we pass in a different stack. If it's not, then we pass in a different stack. Okay, so we're going to do that in our app as well. But before that, we're going to create our new screen. So we're going to create a chat screen, import React, similar chat. Default chat. Okay. Now we're going to be testing. Now we're going to be using our the library that we have imported. The name will be React Native gifted chat. So we're going to be importing gifted chat here. If we pass it here, okay. So let's see. Create a new stack screen, and we give it chat component. It's a chat component. Let's comment this out for now. CO app. So here you can see that we have the chat page ready to be implemented. So here we can say hello, and it won't do anything yet because there's no logic behind the implementation of the chat system itself. So what we're going to do here is we have the check. Okay, so we will need to use that here. So it's a constant is login and set login. We use that. It's a false. Okay. So here we can check is login. If it's login, then we are passing chat. Else we pass in these two stacks. So just like that, if we go here, it will show login. If we change this to true, it will show the chat screen that we just created a while ago. Okay, so one way we can check. Okay, anyway, we just go to chat page first, and then inside chat page here, you can actually pass in user props. So for user props, what we need to pass to the gifted chat will be the ID, and also the name of the user. Okay, so ID and name. So if we go back to the documentation, you can see that it will require the, it's underscore. Okay. And then we will also need to pass in messages and onSend. So let's create our onSend method for now. So it will receive a messages. So since it's passing in a parameter of messages, so we receive it here, and we'll just trying it out for now. And for our messages, we will be using React hook as well. Now we go to our app. So if we type something and click here, so we'll send new messages. So let's see what is passed in this messages parameter. Just put pass, and we go to our terminal. We can see that it's passing in an object, an array of object with ID, the creation date, the tags, the user ID that is creating the message itself. So to see that here, we can just copy this and we pass it here. That's one of the objects when we initialize. So if you see here, it will display a test over here. So that is how our chat app will work. So let's say this one is the same ID. So we say hello. It will appear hello. And then if we change the user ID to 2, for example, and call this James, change the ID a little bit. Save that. So it will appear here as another user. So the more user that you have, the more color that you will see. This one is 3. Call this as 1. Okay. So here we have 3 users communicating with each other. So this is how we're going to implement our chat, but instead of using the array in the state management, we will use Firebase so that everyone can chat with each other without using the same phone. Because if we are using one state, then it will just be stateful in that phone itself. So we're going to be removing this. And then to see it works, we can just put here set messages. We'll say just and suggest number 1. Okay, so come here, say hello over here. We'll just put this. Okay. This will be an array, so if we do that, something like this. Okay, so there will be a new text every time. Try it again. Okay, so it will keep appearing. And if you realize the arrangement of the chat is inverted, it goes up as you type in more chat. So we can do that by reversing the looks like this. So if you go back here, a new one will appear here. Okay, so this one, let's ignore this for now. Okay, so will appear down there. Let's restart this. Okay, so it's working. Right. Now that it's working, we need to have a way to retrieve the user that is logged in currently, because we don't want to be assigning manually to our user object over here. So because of that, we're going to come back to our SDK and create a method called getUser. What it's going to do is just going to return Firebase auth current user. So to use that in our chat, we will just call Firebase Sdk, just a get user, and here we will need the ID. Here will be the display name. Okay. So we can see the item over here like that. So we, oops. Okay, so because we are not logged in yet, we have to log in first. Go back to our authentication. So we are logged in. Let's see if this works. Okay, let's test our message over here and see. Yep, so the user ID will be the ID that we have over here. And yeah, the name is empty. Okay, so when we sign up a user, we will need to set the display name. So in the create user method right here, we will need to pass in okay, let's see. Okay, so we will get the user here. Firebase user equal to Firebase Firebase.auth and current user. So what we're going to do with the current user is we want to Firebase user.update profile. So in update profile, what we're going to be updating is the display name, like this. So we'll pass in the object display name. So here we will say display name is equal to username. Okay, once that's done, we can say alert. Just something like this. Okay. Let's try it again. So we set this to false first. Click sign up, registered. Okay, so if we set this to true, no. Okay. Okay, let's try our test. So here we can see that the name is already in the current user object itself. So we can use that when creating a new message. Okay. Now we go back to chat. When we are sending, so we will want to create the message in our database, which is the real-time database that we are using. So what we're going to do is we're going to say send message, and this is going to be async as well. We're going to only pass one message to our database. So we'll say await Firebase.database. So we're going to be using the database library. And we say reference, we give it a path. We can just say messages. And then we say push. So the value that we want to push in will be the message. Okay, so since if you see here, the created add that we are using is actually a string. So since it's a string, we won't be able to pass it into Firebase. So we will have to create our own created add field, which is using date. And the best one will be using timestamp. So once that's ready, we go back to our method over here. So instead of using this, we will want to use our Firebase Sdk dot send message and use one message. Since it's Firebase Sdk, we're going to be using async. Okay, let's try it out. Here, say hello, and check our database. So here you can see the first message that we have created. So it is working fine. Let's push in another message. We should push another one. Okay, so there is sending message is working fine. Now we will need to create a method to retrieve the messages. So here, what we're going to do is to have a callback because we want this to be an event listener. So every time we have an updated message, new message, and this method will be called. And it will call the callback to pass the value of the updated messages. So yeah, we will go through it. So we will use database as well, and we say the reference is messages. Okay, so good. So we want to be listening on messages, on value. Okay, so every time a new value is being returned, it will return a snapshot of that of the database. So as you can see here, it's a snapshot. So we can pass this snapshot to our method by using the callback function that we've created. So snap.value. Okay. So if it's so we want to check whether the value is undefined or it's defined. So if it's undefined, we want to pass a null back to our callback, like that. And we can implement that in our chat right here. So for our chat, we're going to be using, since we can't use component did noun or component did update in functional components. So what we can use is we use effect. So use effect will be similar to component update. So how we use it is something like this: use effect, and we pass in a function. So here, dependency. If you see here, this is where we want to identify when we want to run the function inside use effect. So if I say message over here, so every time we update this message, the use effect will call the function inside of this use effect. So if, say for example, we have multiple use effect here, so it will be something like component did mount. Component, we can't see it here, but anyway, component did mount. So in component did mount we have props. So we'll say props. So say if we say props, this props in, let's say title is not equal to this props, something like this. This will be in the previous reactive syntax. So we will run something like update title, something like that. So same goes here. So if this is like this, we will run the update. So we're going to be using use effect here. Okay, so inside of this use effect, we're going to have an async function. And inside this async function, we're going to be calling our Firebase Sdk. Get. Okay, so since here we have a callback that we need to pass in, so whenever we create a callback like this, we say messages, pass it into console log. Doing this. So let's see if this is working. Let's see. Async function equals to await Firebase Sdk get messages. What's the name? Messages, and we pass in a callback. So once that's done, we need to call the function like that. Okay. Try to run this, and we can see the messages that we get from Firebase. So what we're going to do next will be to push this into our messages. So we're going to say constant data is equal to messages. If messages is available, so we want to return the object values. Else we want to return an empty array. Another one will be create the sorted data. We want to reverse this, and we say set messages as sorted. All right, let's see if it works. Yep. We can say hello, and oh, okay, let's check. Test. Something is wrong. Oh, here, item. Okay, so let's pass in hello. Oh, it's messed up. Let's reload this page. Be this. Hmm. Let's try to log in. Let's try it out first. So here we have, I assume this is another user because we are logged in as a different user right now. So to double check, let's try again. So let's try to send another. Right. So by right, this should be working already. Let's try it on another device. I think something's wrong here. Let's try to sign up. Okay, now login. So we are logged in. Okay, so now I'm registered and logged in as someone else. Let's say so. Yeah. So you can see that the chat app is working. So what's left to do will be updating the design, the UI of it, and yeah, should be working fine. Yep, I think, yeah, we are there. Okay, I think we finished the tutorial. Can have a Q&A for questions right now.
Hi. So thank you, Eleazar. So if anyone have any questions, to just shoot in the chat box. Are there any questions?
I will post the project code inside a GitHub repo, and I will share it to Alia, and you can share it to in the maybe your Facebook or something.
Yeah. Well, we'll just wait a few minutes. If there's no if there's no questions, I'll just end the session.
Okay.
So are there any questions for Eleazar?
You can throw me any question. It can be related to Firebase. It can be related to React Native. Anything extra that you want to know? Because for this tutorial, I would say it is sort of the most basic that you can learn before you start to go to companies and to build a production grade application. So this is a good way to start if you are not familiar with React Native. So if you are interested, then you should be able to learn more by reading more throughout your learning experience. And yeah, I think that's how I learned, because I'm I won't say I'm specialized in mobile app, but I happen to know it as well. So since it is something good to learn, so I learned it, and slowly I sort of acquired the knowledge in using React Native. So yeah, so I think that's how the process for everyone should be like. It should be more of an independent learning first, and then if you feel like you need someone to guide you, then you can ask someone that is more experienced in the framework or in the language. That way you will learn more.
You can contact Eleazar as well to ask more about this Firebase.
Yep.
Quite experienced in it. So I don't think there's any other questions. So we'll just end the session here. Right. Thank
Okay.
you so much
All
for your
right.
time and for your presentation. It's really, really useful. I myself don't know much about it, so it's been really productive for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.